3 eerie, true exploration horror stories. This is Mr. H. You're listening to Masked Horror. The abandoned psychiatric hospital. I should have known better. The thrill of sneaking into that old psychiatric hospital had sounded like fun, the kind of thing we'd laugh about later. But standing in those decaying hallways, I could hardly remember what made us think this was a good idea. There were 4 of us, me, Dave, Brittany, and Tom. We'd driven out there, drawn by the rumors, eerie, long abandoned hallways, creepy graffiti, the usual urban legend stuff. People online said the place was haunted, that you could still feel the presence of patients treated there before it shut down in the 70s. Apparently, the hospital's director had conducted strange experiments on his patients, treating them like test subjects. But it was just a story, right? At first, everything went as expected. We walked through the cracked entrance, the glass door long shattered. Inside, the air smelled damp and metallic. Graffiti lined the walls, things like "Help Me" and "Turn Back" scrawled in faded spray paint. It was exactly the kind of vibe we wanted. Then things changed. We just made it to the 2nd floor, exploring an old office, when we heard it. A faint whisper, like someone calling my name. I froze, glancing at the others, but they didn't seem to hear anything. Just as I was about to shrug it off, Brittany whispered, Did you hear that?" We all listened, dead silent. There it was again, faint and echoing down the hall. "Help me." We laughed nervously, trying to shrug it off as echoes or the wind moving through the building. But as we stepped back into the hall, it happened again. This time, the voice said, "Leave." And it wasn't faint, it was loud, so close it felt like someone was whispering right into my ear. Panic set in, and we tried to head back the way we'd come, but every hallway looked wrong. They twisted and shifted somehow, each turn more confusing than the last. Stairs that should have led down only took us further up. The building itself was twisting in on us. Brittany grabbed my arm, her face pale. "This isn't funny anymore. Let's get out of here." Doors that had been open when we came in were now locked or missing entirely. We found ourselves in the same hallway over and over, the walls seeming to close in. Dave's flashlight flickered in the endless darkness. "Someone's messing with us," he muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. Then the voices came back louder and overlapping. They sounded frantic, like dozens of voices pleading and demanding all at once. My skin prickled as something cold brushed past me, and I swore I felt fingers wrapping around my wrist. Finally, Tom yelled, "Run!" He sprinted ahead, and we scrambled after him, our hearts racing. Every turn felt wrong, but somehow, we found an open door leading outside. We stumbled out into the cold night air, gasping, shaking, and covered in sweat. We piled into the car without a word, speeding off into the darkness. No one spoke on the drive back, each of us too shaken, too rattled to even look at each other. But I could still feel that lingering presence, like someone or something was watching us even as we left. To this day, we don't talk about that night. I mean, we do talk about it, but we never really have an extended conversation about it. We are still freaked out even after years have passed. We escaped, but none of us have ever been the same. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I can still hear those whispers, sometimes calling my name, inviting me to come back. I can only imagine what would happen if we ever did go back. The hidden bunker. We'd only planned to explore the farmhouse for a few minutes, a harmless adventure during our weekend hike. We loved to hike and loved exploring the unknown. But now, standing in the middle of a cold, concrete bunker, I knew we'd made a huge mistake. It started in the shed. We were just looking around when Kyle kicked some dirt off an old trap door in the floor. Curiosity got the best of us. He pulled it open, revealing a ladder leading down into darkness. We figured it was an old rot cellar, or maybe a storm shelter. We thought it'd be fun to check out, maybe fool around a bit, a bucket list type of experience. But when we climbed down, it was nothing like a cellar. Instead, we found ourselves in a large, cement-walled room filled with equipment, monitors, old security cameras, stacks of folders, and strange notes pinned on every wall. The place was meticulously organized, as if someone had just left it yesterday. It reeked of stale air and something else I couldn't place, like copper or blood. As we started looking around, I noticed the monitors were labeled with street names. One monitor had notes of everyday activities with family names. Zimmerman's taking in the groceries at 12 p.m. Smith's going for a walk at 7 p.m. Another stated, dinner at 6 p.m. every night. I shivered. This wasn't some strange bunker. It was a surveillance room. Someone had been watching the whole area for years. Then I found the files. I started reading one out loud. Inside were logs of more dates, times, and notes like, lights off at 11 p.m. Woman arrives at 3:30 p.m. Kids playing outside. Each file was filled with disturbing details about people's lives, right down to what time they did their laundry and went to bed. Whoever used this place knew everything about everyone within miles. Kyle looked at me, his face pale. "We should get out of here," he said, and I agreed. But just as we turned, we heard a faint clicking noise, like a lock sliding into place. Our heads whipped up to the trap door. It had slammed shut. I bolted for the ladder, but Kyle grabbed my arm, whispering, "Wait, do you hear that?" A low metallic hum filled the room. It sounded like something powering up, vibrating the concrete walls. I checked my phone, but the screen was dead. No signal. It was like the bunker had trapped us inside. Panic took over. We started banging on the door, yelling, hoping someone, anyone, might hear us. The hum grew louder, filling my ears, making my skin crawl. My heart pounded as I felt the walls closing in. Then, as suddenly as it started, the hum stopped. A thick silence fell. Slowly, the trap door creaked open above us. I don't know how or why it did, but I didn't care at that moment. We didn't waste a second. We scrambled up the ladder and ran from the shed through the trees until we finally reached our car. We didn't stop to look back. We didn't say a word. But every night since then, I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching, whoever it is that let us go. The tunnel under the old school. I wish we'd never gone into that school. It was supposed to be torn down within the month, and my friend Mark and I thought it would be cool to check it out before it was gone for good. I know the story's going to be hard to believe, but it really happened. It all started when we slipped in through a broken window, expecting graffiti-covered walls and broken desks. But what we found went far beyond anything we'd imagined. The gymnasium was massive, echoing with each step we took. Mark noticed a small, barely visible doorway along the far wall. "Probably storage," he shrugged, tugging it open. But inside was a narrow staircase, winding down and disappearing into darkness. Curious, we descended the steps, our phone flashlights barely illuminating the way. We expected a cramped storage area, maybe an old locker room. Instead, the stairs led us to a long, narrow tunnel. It stretched endlessly, dim and lined with faded symbols carved into the walls. Each mark seemed random at first, just scratches, but the further we went, the symbols started looking like faces with wide, empty stares, staring right at us. They seemed angry. The air grew thicker the deeper we went. I felt my chest tighten, each breath harder to take. And then, faint at first, I heard it, a whisper, soft and echoing down the tunnel. Stay. Mark and I froze, our lights shaking in our hands. Did you hear that? I whispered. He nodded, looking back the way we'd come. Let's get out of here, man. This place is messed up. But when we turned, the tunnel seemed longer than before, stretching in both directions with no end in sight. The doorway was gone. We both started walking fast, then running, but every step seemed to pull us deeper. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a strange, hypnotic chant. It's safe here. Stay with us. Mark grabbed my shoulder. We're not alone, he said, his face pale as chalk. I felt it then too. A hand gripped my shoulder from behind, cold and bony. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just more of those symbols, more of those haunting, empty faces scratched into the walls, watching us. We kept running, breathless, disoriented, until finally, we stumbled out into a basement that wasn't familiar. It looked nothing like the gym we'd entered from. We gasped for air, our lungs burning. My phone showed that hours had passed, far longer than we thought. Once we found our way out, we ran straight to the police, rambling on about hidden tunnels and strange whispers. They didn't take us seriously at all, but we learned that the school was once unofficially used as an evacuation and disaster relief center. The school had an underground shelter which was used during times of local disasters, where several people allegedly died of carbon monoxide poisoning. We were determined to get concrete evidence or video, pictures, anything, something to prove that we weren't crazy. But when we tried to go back to the school a week later, it was gone, reduced to rubble, nothing but a flat, empty lot. It was demolished earlier than the scheduled demolition date. No one could confirm the existence of any tunnel, and no official records showed anything about underground shelters or bunkers. To this day, I can still hear that whisper in the dead of night. It's safe here. Stay with us.